After funding their lives in silence, my dad called me worthless. Now he's jobless, broke, and I hold every key to their future. My name is Liam. I'm 29, and until last year, I believed I understood what family meant. Not the Hallmark card variety, but the kind you built your life around, even if it means shouldering more than your fair share of the burden. I've always been the quiet one, the responsible son, the one who sends flowers on birthdays and takes up the slack when no one else notices it. But I didn't grow up expecting to be the backbone of a family that treated me as if I were disposable. That section happened softly, almost quietly, like right under the floorboards, which you don't notice until everything crashes in. Growing up, I was the middle child. My older brother Adam was the golden boy. Varsity football, charming, and always surrounded by a crowd. My younger sister Mia was a princess from the minute she was born. And me? I was the one who had B+ marks and was informed I was not performing to my full potential. I honestly didn't mind. I kept my head down, earned a scholarship, moved out, and eventually founded my own tiny IT firm, which miraculously took off. After 3 hard years of ramen, 16-hour days, and being ghosted by every investor I presented to. The weird thing is that when I was struggling, they remained silent. But when the money arrived, I reconnected with my family. It started little. My father asked if I might help cover Adam's remaining car payments, just until he was promoted. Then came Mia's private college tuition, which was only partially covered by financial help. My mother required assistance with roof repairs, then heating system upgrades, and finally, the kitchen redesign she had always desired. And just like that, I was paying for 3 families while receiving texts like, "Can you VMO me for the groceries?" Initially I didn't mind. I was glad I could help. I even convinced myself that I was creating something, a legacy even. I hoped that one day I'd be able to say that I improved the lives of those I cared about. But something about the way they regarded it as if it was an obligation, as if I wasn't doing anything special, started to irritate me. Last Thanksgiving was the tipping point. I hosted, not to brag, but because I finally had a house large enough to accommodate everyone. I had it catered, cleaned up, and built up a fire pit in my backyard. Nobody offered to help, even with the dishes. Adam offered a toast midway through, commenting about how fortunate we are to have each other, and how family always comes through, never once mentioning that I paid for the entire event. Mia had brought her new lover and barely looked up from her phone. And my father? He spent the entire evening discussing how things were tougher back then, and how much easier things are now for children. I swallowed it all with a smile, but within I was already withdrawing. Then came the night when everything fell apart. It was a random Tuesday, probably 2 months later. I'd just ended a long meeting and returned home to a voice message from my father. His voice was clipped, tired and cutting, like only parents can be. He responded, "All you do is take. You've never given this family anything worth remembering. If you had any pride, you'd stop acting like we owe you something and just leave." It stunned me. For a moment I believed I had misheard it, so I played it again. I didn't yell, "All you do is take." I did not call back. I just stared at the message for a bit before walking over to the window and looking out at the city lights I used to enjoy. Something inside me softly gave up, like an old hinge snapping underweight. That night, I packed my stuff and fled. No dramatic farewell, no announcement. I even instructed my assistant to pause all outgoing payments from family accounts. Simply a clean, silent separation. 3 days passed, then 1 week. The radio is silent. Nobody called. Nobody texted. It took them about a month to notice. Mia was the first. She called me late one Friday night, her voice shaking. "Liam, hey, I just logged into the school portal and my tuition didn't go through this month. Did something happen with the account?" I could hear the worry she was attempting to suppress, that faux, casual tone you adopt when you're trying not to appear desperate. I responded with a single text message. Though I never gave this family anything. There was no follow-up or explanation. She did not react, but within an hour, I had 4 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Adam, and 1 from a number I did not recognize. My dad's voicemail was darkly comical. "Liam, we need to talk. Whatever this little stunt is, it's not funny. Your sister's future is on the line. No apologies, only demands. The same old tone that indicated, you owe us. That weekend, I flew to Denver. I had never been before, but I needed to feel as if I had escaped from orbit. I stayed in a little Airbnb with a view of the mountains, slept better than I had in years, and avoided checking email for the first time in a long time. I did not open any messages. I allowed the world to spin without me. And what about back home? That's where everything started to fall apart. Mia's school issued a notice of potential withdrawal due to non-payment. Adam's car, which remained unpaid, was repossessed. My parents' mortgage payment bounced. And with that, the foundation they had built on my quiet shattered wide apart. They began contacting distant family members, explaining their version of events, how I abruptly cut them off and abandoned my obligations. But you can't reinvent a story when so many people already know the reality. And some of my cousins? They knew. They have witnessed the pattern for years. I received a note from one of them. Emma, my mother's niece. She replied, I've always admired how patient you are. But I'm glad you finally stopped being their safety net. That message impacted me harder than I expected. Because the truth is that I didn't seek vengeance. I desired peace. But after you remove the tool they use to control you, when they realize they need you more than you ever needed them, the real unraveling begins. I spent a week in Denver, largely doing nothing. Every morning I'd walk to a small coffee shop near the Airbnb, journal for a few minutes, and then meander about downtown to remind myself what uninterrupted solitude felt like. There was no buzzing phone, no obligation, and no one begging, can you just do me one more favor? It seemed strange at first, as if I had to unlearn the habit of preparing for other people's disappointments. By the second week, I had leased a car and drove to Boulder. I hiked alone, which I'd always wanted to do but never did since every time I scheduled a trip, someone in the family needed a bailout. A faulty air conditioner, an overdue credit card. Mia once called from a Cancun resort, stating she had misplaced her wallet and wanted me to wire her emergency funds. That recollection came to mind as I stood at the brink of a cliff walk, wind biting through my jacket. The entire valley stretched out underneath me. I actually laughed out loud. It resonated against the cliffs. It took 3 weeks for my mom to break the silence with something more than passive-aggressive voicemails. She emailed me. The subject line read, "We need you to come home." There was no greeting, just a long block of text that began, "I don't know what's gotten into you," and spiraled into, "Your father is furious." Then, "We've done so much for you," and ended, "Family doesn't abandon family." I stared at it for a long time. Family does not abandon family, unless they do. They always made me feel like a debit card with a heartbeat. Every birthday they forgot. Every time they took money from me without saying thank you. Every holiday, I sat in the background as Adam delivered his speeches, and Mia was showered with gifts. They called it tradition, not desertion. I didn't respond. Instead, I emailed the email to Daniel, my lawyer, who had assisted me in establishing a trust fund several years earlier. I instructed him to begin the process of transferring the remaining tuition payments to a scholarship program for first-generation college students, those who truly needed assistance. They wouldn't laugh behind my back while depleting my financial account. I also requested him to look into who was listed on the deed for the lake cottage, which my parents used every year, and that I had paid off in full under the false premise that it would be a shared family investment. It turns out that my name was still on the documents. So, I made a decision. That Sunday morning I scheduled a flight back home. Not to reconcile, not to feel guilty, but to gather receipts. I didn't inform anyone I was coming. I arrived about noon, picked up a rented car, and drove straight to the house. The same one I helped remodel when Dad threatened to sell it, unless someone paid to repair the water damage. It looked the same. Familiar and artificial. Like a movie set designed to look like a home. As I drove up the driveway, I noticed Adam's old pickup parked outside. I assumed he moved back in following the repossession. I did not knock. I walked in with the spare key my mother had forgotten I had. When I walked into the living room, I heard conversations. "He's being dramatic," Adam said. "He'll come crawling back once he gets over himself." Mia's voice grew quieter. "I don't understand why he's doing this. I mean, it's not a lot of money for him, is it?" My father growled something I couldn't quite understand. Following that, it was clear. Liam's always been the weakest, hiding behind his computer, acting like money makes him special. I stood in the corridor, invisible, as they continued to tear me apart, as if I weren't the reason the lights were turned on. I did not cry. I did not storm in. I didn't even feel angry, just confirmation. They never saw me. Not really. I discreetly pulled out and drove to the lake cottage. I entered through the front door, took one long look at the open-plan kitchen, the wall of family portraits that didn't include one of myself, and began taking images for the real estate listing. By dark, my lawyer had everything he needed to start the deal. It was Saturday. On Monday, I left a farewell message on the family group chat. You said I never gave this family anything, so I'm finally giving you what you've always acted like you wanted. Distance. No more tuition. No more car payments. No more roof repairs. Sell your own memories. I'm out. I exited the group chat and blacklisted everyone. I assumed that would be the end of it. But what I didn't anticipate was how deep the web of dependence had become. And how quickly it would unravel. Mia faced expulsion within a week after I cut every thread. Adam was dismissed for missing too many shifts while attempting to figure things out. My parents' bank called with queries about a mortgage they couldn't afford. And me? I was already halfway to the airport for a fresh journey, this time to Tokyo. First class. There is no guilt. There are no strings. But what about the real kicker? What occurred the next time they attempted to crawl back? I was somewhere over the Pacific when my phone finally caught up with the mayhem I'd left behind. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, most likely Mia's pals, or someone attempting to calm me down on my family's behalf. My father sent emails that appeared to be threats, but rapidly devolved into frantic half-sentences like, "We didn't mean it that way," and "You're still our son." The latter made me giggle. I did not listen to a single voicemail or open any of the attachments. I just saw the notifications pile up like a quiet slideshow of panic. It's amazing how those who think they've never contributed anything suddenly realize how much they gave once it's gone. Tokyo was everything I needed. Clean, quiet, and inconspicuous. I went past temples and neon-lit arcades, allowing my mind to breathe in ways I hadn't imagined possible. There is no guilt dragging on my shoulders, no unexpected emergencies. For the first time in my life, I was just me. Not someone's backup plan. Not the family's fixer. 2 weeks into the trip, I had only unlocked one person. Emma, my cousin. Throughout the entire aftermath, she had only sent one message. No pleading. There's no drama. Just say, "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." Not to persuade you, but to listen. I met up with her once I returned. We sat in a cafe near her apartment, and she had brought her laptop. "I want to show you something," she explained, sliding it across the table. It was, strangely enough, a Reddit thread. Mia had posted on a throwaway account, begging for financial assistance to stay in school due to an unanticipated family situation. She told a scenario that depicted me as the unstable one, claiming I abandoned the family for no reason and was suffering a breakdown. People donated money. Strangers. Emma gazed at me with a stiff lip. "She has raised nearly $6,000 thus far. I figured you should know." I glanced at the screen, my stomach twisting with sadness rather than fury. There it was again. The same story molded to fit the victim role, but this time she was doing it openly, monetizing it, and weaponizing strangers' sympathy. Worst of all, she still didn't realize what she had done. That night, I did not express my wrath or confront her directly. I did something quieter. I grabbed screenshots of every payment I'd made for her schooling, including bank transfers, tuition receipts, and the textbook money I wired during her freshman year. I shared these on a private Imgur album. No names, no dramatic captions, only dates, money amounts, and payment confirmations. Then I left an anonymous comment on the thread. "Before you donate, maybe ask where the other $90,000 went." When assistance is no longer available, some people forget who assisted them. It did not become viral. It did not need to. However, within 24 hours, moderators removed her post for suspicious conduct, and the comments changed. That was the first significant consequence any of them faced. The second occurred a week later, when I received a certified letter in my workplace. It was from my father, not handwritten, but typed, like a legal notice. It began, "We are formally requesting a meeting to discuss the breakdown of our family dynamic." I nearly choked laughing, as if they were attempting to hold a board meeting to repair what they had broken. But hidden in the legalese was the real reason they contacted us. They wanted a share of the revenues from the lake house sale. They apparently believed they had emotional equity in the property. I passed the letter to Daniel without saying anything. He read it, smirked, and added, "Would you like me to give them a reminder that emotional equity is not legally binding?" I nodded. We then went one step further and emailed them a copy of the original agreement. When I first volunteered to pay for the lake cottage, one father had already signed years before. It clearly stated, in his own words, "I accept that this home was purchased by, and will remain the property of Liam, last name. I release all future claims." He had forgotten. Or I hoped I did. That letter effectively silenced them. But the silence did not last. Not once did word get out that I was also selling the main house. See, when I was in Tokyo, Daniel and I were working on a modest side project. Years ago I borrowed a considerable sum under a verbal arrangement when they couldn't keep up with their home payments. They had never paid me back. Daniel kept track of every deposit, collated all wire transfers, and we filed a lien on the house. They now owed me more than $80,000, which allowed me to lawfully force a sale. Emma called me that night. "Liam, they're panicking. Your mother called me in tears. Your father is threatening to go on social media." I exhaled. "Allow him. I have receipts. Let's see who wins the PR battle." But I didn't tell her that I wasn't doing it for vengeance anymore. I was doing it for closure, because none of them recognized that I had given them everything. My time, my savings, my loyalty. And they had misinterpreted it all as weakness. They imagined I was a faucet they could turn on any time they were thirsty. And now they were discovering what thirst truly feels like. And yet, the most rewarding moment had yet to come. Because the day the house went up for sale, I walked through the front door for the final time. I parked across the street on the morning of the auction. The air had that biting, stagnant chill that hung over our neighborhood in early autumn. I sat in the car for a minute, simply watching. It was weird to see my childhood home, which had absorbed so much history, love and misery, suddenly with a simple white sign on the front lawn. Notice of foreclosure. Auction today. No trespassing. I got out, hands in my pockets, and walked slowly toward the house. The door was already opened. Daniel was inside, conversing with the auctioneer, a middle-aged lady with a clipboard and a no-nonsense demeanor. He nodded when he noticed me. "You don't have to be here for this," he replied kindly. "I wanna be," I answered. So I did. Not for revenge. Not for the show. But this moment demanded a witness. Someone to see it, feel it, and ensure it didn't slip away like everything else I'd eaten over the years. I strolled slowly across the living room, as if I was trying to take it all in one more time. Adam tossed a baseball inside, which left a dent in the hardwood. The faded smear on the carpet from when Mia dropped nail paint and blamed it on me. My parents used to put up report cards and drawings on this wall, until they discreetly stopped adding mine. It was weird to see so little of myself here, as if I had been a ghost in my own family saga. I entered the kitchen next. That one struck harder. I recall late evenings helping Mom prepare for holiday dinners, cleaning dishes while she pretended not to hear Dad yelling in the next room, and joking with Emma about burnt pies and undercooked turkeys. And now it was just a kitchen. A box of walls and discarded effort. There was still a photo on the counter of the entire family, taken 2 Christmases ago, at my expense. I remembered paying the photographer's deposit, wearing matching attire, and being cropped out when the shot was put online. I picked up the photograph, stared at it for a long time, and then flipped it face down. By noon a few cars began to arrive. A few serious bidders, some interested neighbors, and lastly, my family. They arrived in Dad's old Chevy, packed in like a twisted family road trip. Mia was the first out, her face blotchy and her red-rimmed eyes hidden beneath huge sunglasses. Adam followed, scowling, evidently only here to play enforcer. Then my parents. Mom appeared worn down, 10 years older than the last time I saw her. Dad. He still strolled as if he owned the ground. He recognized me quickly. "Liam," he said, his voice low and seething. "We need to talk. Now." I did not move. He stepped up. Adam had stepped behind him like a shadow. "You're really doing this?" Dad inquired. "You're going to humiliate your own family over what exactly? Some perceived slight?" I looked him in the eye for the first time in many years. "It's not a slight," I explained calmly. "It's a pattern. And it ends today." "You ungrateful little," he began, but I raised my hand. "Don't. Just don't." "Mia has joined them now," her voice cracking. "I'm going to lose my scholarship because of this. I had to drop 2 classes already. Why are you doing this to us?" I turned to face her. "I paid for your first 3 years. Every tuition bill. Every textbook. You never said thank you, not once. Instead, you let them convince you I was the problem." "I didn't," she began. "You posted online that I was unstable," I added, taking out my phone. "You lied to strangers for money. And now you want sympathy?" Her face wrinkled. Mom eventually spoke, and her voice was gentle. "Liam, families don't do this to each other." "No," I replied. "Families don't act like this. You took everything. My time, my money, my trust. And when I stopped giving, you called me selfish." The auctioneer's voice rang out sharply and professionally. "We'll begin the auction in 5 minutes." Dad looked around, now unsure of himself. "You can't do this. You wouldn't even have this house if it weren't for us." "You're right," I replied. "So I'm taking it back." They stood there, rooted to the driveway and helpless for the first time in years. I walked away. The house sold within an hour. A retired couple from out of town is seeking a house near their grandchildren. They paid in full. I signed the paperwork, gave Daniel the keys, and didn't look back. 3 weeks later, the moving truck arrived. My parents attempted to dispute it, arguing that they had rights. But the court order was clear. They had 30 days from the date of sale. No exclusions. They did not even pack everything. They simply took what they could and left the rest in piles. Years of junk, boxes of old trophies, broken appliances, and forgotten memories. One of the movers discovered my high school journal stowed away in a box labeled junk. I flipped through it. Every page was filled with goals. Attend college, start a business, buy a home, and care for my family. It's funny how none of those dreams ended the way I expected. I donated the furniture and demolished the rest. Emma assisted me in closing out the estate. She was the only one who remained objective throughout it all, and the only one I trusted. She hugged me for quite some time after it was over. "You did the right thing," she said softly, "even if it doesn't feel like it yet." And she was correct. It did not feel wonderful in the typical sense. There was no soaring victory or ultimate confrontation with slow clapping applause, only silence. A piercing, resounding silence gradually gave way to tranquility. I moved soon after that, bought a loft in another city. Smaller and simpler, but mine. No hidden bills, no guilt. The calls eventually ended. The emails dried up. Over time, even the bitterness disappeared. I didn't detest them. I just unplugged, as if breaking the final thread of a tattered rope that had been dragging me beneath for years. One night I sat on my balcony, sipping tea and watching the lights flicker in the building across the street. Last Thanksgiving, I thought about Adam's toast, and how they all grinned as if they were in a commercial, blissfully ignorant that the glue holding them together was crumbling. And then I realized something. They were never truly a family. They were a system that only functioned as long as I remained quiet, useful, and little. And now, they now had to learn to stand without me. I received a communication a few months later, an email from Mia. "I don't expect a response," it stated. "I just wanted to say I understand now. And I apologize." I read it twice, then once more, then I archived it. Not out of spite, but because I no longer required closure from them. I already had it from myself. For the first time in my life, that was sufficient. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Karen demands VIP table claiming to know the owner, yet I'm the owner, and she was left crying with a $4,000 bill as after my revenge. Karen bursts into the restaurant, screaming that she knows the owner and demands that we give her and her group of friends the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The problem is that I own the restaurant and don't know who this lady is. However, I decided to play along and see what occurred. During dinner, one of the girls asked me if I thought my life was useless because I worked as a waiter. That was then I realized that all bets were out, and I was determined to extract my revenge. Here's what I did. This happened near Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents immigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and opened a restaurant. When they died, my parents took over the restaurant, which they expanded and improved throughout the decades. I've been working in the restaurant since I was 15. As my parents became older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending their winters in Florida. They sold the restaurant to me a few years ago, but they kept a small portion of the stock as a side income in addition to their savings. As soon as I got control, I modernized the old house. I restored the eatery, changed the logo, and contacted local and national publications about placing advertisements. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. It was slow at first, and I worried that the loan I took out to do all of this was the worst mistake I'd ever made, that I'd damaged 3 generations of a family business. But it soon started to work. A local semi-famous YouTuber featured us in one of his videos, encouraging more people to visit and review us. Even on a Monday, we rapidly saw 5 to 10 times the usual volume of activity. We became a popular place for huge parties, and celebrities frequently stopped by on particular occasions. I even invited a few high-profile clients to come and cook for our guests. This cost a fortune, but we were fully stocked for the holidays. People had to make reservations in July to get a table in December. It took years to reach this stage. When things become busy, I don't just sit in the back office, I'm on the floor doing whatever needs to be done, whether it's greeting customers, bussing tables, or mopping floors. On nights with high-profile guests or events, I don a jacket and take command. One night, 6 women walked in. 5 of them appeared to be in their early 20s, with the leader possibly in her mid-20s. My best guess was that she was the elder sister of one of the females or an older sorority sister to new college students. I was greeting them at the door, and as they approached, Queen Bee Karen was telling the baby Karens how great this restaurant is, how good the food is, and how there might even be celebrities there. When she approached me, she said she needed a table for 6. It was my reply. Of course, can I get the name on the reservation? She stared at me. She replied, "Oh, I didn't make one, but that's fine. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He said he always leaves 1 or 2 tables open for special guests, and we can have one tonight." This is true for many well-known eateries, and I've recently done it as well. But I had no idea who this woman was, and she had never mentioned any of this to me. I realized she was attempting to get in without a reservation, but she had chosen the worst person to do so with. I informed her, "I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we have no seats available." I didn't want to go full out and say, "I'm the owner, and we have never spoken before, so I never promised you anything," but I also didn't want to disgrace her in front of the other girls she was with at the moment. She then told one of the other girls to snap a photo of me. She stated that she would communicate with the owner to ensure that I was either cleaning toilets or fired before the end of the week. The other girls behind her agreed, shouting things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I wasn't sure if they were in on it with her or if they really thought she knew the owner. Queen Bee Karen then stated, "Look, you can either give us a table or I will make your life extremely difficult. This is not worth losing your job." She kept pointing, attempting to demean me, and then saying things like, "Obviously, you aren't anyone here, because if you were, you would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or of course." She was constantly attempting to push me down and steal the table. At this point, it had been a difficult day for me, and I had 3 options. Number 1, I could inform her that I am the owner and confront her with all of this. Number 2, I could simply hand her the table and let it go. Or, finally, I could show Queen Bee Karen and her minions a lesson. I chose option 3. I smiled at her and replied, "Of course ma'am, please follow me." I handed her one of the 3 tables we keep open in case a celebrity wanders in, which happens occasionally. I responded, "I apologize for everything, and you are right, it would be simpler just to give you the table." I also informed her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be complimentary. I sat them down and personally served them. While they were sitting there, I said, "We need one of your credit cards and IDs just to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave." Queen Karen gave me her card and told the baby Karen minions, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their complimentary beverages, and warned them that due to our busy schedule tonight, the food may be delayed. The females were solely concerned about the free drinks. They ordered 3 rounds and still hadn't received their food. They ultimately called and requested me to look into it, all while giving me the worst attitude since they arrived. I assured them I'd look into it, but also asked if they needed more drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds. They were sloshed by the time the appetizers arrived, having spent most of the night drinking on an empty stomach and nibbling salads. As the dinner arrived, additional drinks were ordered. What these females didn't realize was that they were sitting at our VIP table, which generally costs a few $1,000s, but I didn't charge them. Except for the first 3 rounds, I charged them for the highly expensive cocktails they consumed throughout the evening. Furthermore, the table they were sitting at was VIP, as previously indicated, hence the menus differed. Prices are not listed on these menus. This is a restaurant industry trade secret. They also served higher-end menu items including white truffle, black caviar dinners, and specially imported West Coast oysters, among others. At one point during the night, I honestly started to wonder what I was doing. I was scared I was going too far with these poor girls. They might not know any better. But there were moments during the night that cheered me, such as when one of the baby Karens asked whether I thought my life was useless because all I ever did was serve. Also, one of the other employees told me that they were plotting ways to mess with me, believing that they could do so whenever they wanted and that I would always give them a table. I heard them say, "He's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter like that. He's such a pushover." There were more comments like that throughout the night, so I continued their life lesson. By the end of the night, each female had racked up a bill of $500 to $600. I delivered Queen Karen a bill for $4,232.23, which included tax and tip. I've never seen someone sober up this quickly. She went from laughing and giggling with her friends to nearly crying. She quickly summoned me over and inquired whether this was a joke. I accepted the bill, looked it over, and apologized. "I will get you the correct bill amount." Again, she appeared absolutely relieved, as if she had received someone else's bill, and called me a effing idiot, before continuing to chat to her friends. When I returned to give her the correct bill, she flipped out again. It was simply a question. "Is there something wrong with this bill that you did not order?" She and the girls were startled and went over every line of the bill, even the first few lines, which described their original 3 rounds as complimentary. They then took out their phones and went over everything 100 times, totaling everything up. Queen Bee, apparently shocked, just replied, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." Part of me thought she'd dine and dash and leave baby Karens with the bill, but I quietly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card, without being too obvious. I was concerned that she would run out of money. 10 minutes later, she comes with new makeup, plainly crying, and tells me about how bad the food was, how terrible the drinks were, and so on, demanding that I at the very least cut the price in half. She went on to add that the baby Karens would help, despite the fact that she had already told them that the night was hers. Then, as if a bright bulb went off in her head, she brought up her purported relationship with the owner once more, as if it would give me extra impetus to cut the price in half. I grinned as I told her, "No, simply no, I cannot change the bill." She pulls out her phone and shows me a string of text messages from someone named after my restaurant, followed by the term owner. I immediately understood what she had been doing in the bathroom, most likely changing one of the other Karen minions' contact names and deleting previous texts to build this new script. I went through the messages and clicked on the contact information before telling her, "That's not the owner's cell phone number." Her reaction was, "He has multiple phones for business, of course. You don't know all of his phone numbers." I said, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it." Her response was to start raving and screaming, which grabbed the attention of the few remaining customers, and I realized it was time to finish this. I told her in a less sympathetic tone, "Cut the crap, little girl. You don't know the owner. You have never been here before, and if you keep shouting, I will call the cops." Her tone shifted as she tried to justify herself as best she could. My response to her pathetic retort was, "My grandpa founded this restaurant. My family has been conducting this business for centuries. I've been working here for almost my entire life. I am the sole proprietor of this restaurant, and I have never seen you, heard of you, or promised anything to a stranger I've never met before tonight." The little Karens were frozen and unsure how to respond. Queen Bee was in tears. I said, "Now I've given you the table you requested? One of these specially reserved tables for high-end clients that I didn't charge you for, as well as 3 rounds of complimentary cocktails. If you don't pay your bill, I'll phone the cops and give them your ID." Karen signed the bill in tears, and the tiny Karens grabbed into their wallets and handed her the cash they had, which was probably a couple $100s, with the promise to reimburse her more. 2 days later, an agitated man enters my restaurant and insists that one of my bartenders speak with me. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait about a half hour. She was with him, but she kept her head down. I took them both to my office and showed him clips from the security cameras, which had especially good audio because they were in the VIP section. We needed to keep accurate records in that area due to previous unrelated mishaps. I showed him most of it, their remarks, orders, and everything. After everything was said and done, he hurried out with her, shouting at her the whole time. I haven't seen or heard from any of them since, but the original bill I handed them, which did not contain the $120 oysters, is framed on my desk. As a side note, I did not lose as much money at the table and during 3 rounds of drinks as you might assume. I didn't lose anything since I didn't expect to gain anything at all. The expense of the lunch and accompanying drinks more than made up for the first 3 rounds losses. So, now that you've learned everything, am I the jerk? Aside from the money, trying to bully their way into grabbing a seat, and avoiding paying the bill, the Karen's perspective on the world was probably the most astounding aspect of the incident. That one statement about the OP's original posters, ineptitude as a waiter really jumped out. It appeared that OP was about to abandon his entire vengeance scheme, but one of the baby Karens questioned him if he felt his life was pointless because all he had become was a waitress. That has to be one of the most ridiculously entitled perspectives we've ever seen on this channel. It may not be as thrilling or insane as some of the other stories, but the fact that she perceives the world in this manner is plain sick. There is nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of your income. This happens frequently with jobs like janitors, and I loathe it when people think they are superior just because they do not work in those roles. There's nothing wrong with becoming a janitor. I don't understand the thinking, but in this case, she not only feels that way, but she also wants to humiliate him for having a difficult job, such as being a waiter, or so she thinks he is doing. Another thing. I'm glad this tale ended on a relatively positive note, with the father seeking to reverse the situation but becoming more upset with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The only thing that frightened me was that the restaurant was recording audio from the people sitting at that table. I'd probably avoid going to a restaurant if I knew my conversations were being recorded. Anyway, I'm pleased everything worked out for the OP, but please tell me how you would have handled the situation if it had been your business and these were your customers. Was the OP a jerk, and why?